Hello, you're watching Proactive. Joining me is Kefi Gold and Corporate Executive Chairman Harry Adams. Harry, good to speak with you today. And of course, lots of news out over the past week. So let's start with Tulu Kapi in Ethiopia, because you're there at the moment. And you say you're making good progress with the early works program.
Yes, well, the early works is essentially demonstrating to all stakeholders, including ourselves, that the community and safety and security is all ready. That's well and truly in train now. It kicked off a couple of months ago. I was there only yesterday at the site, and yeah, the community, how would I condense the feedback from the community at yesterday's meeting when I was there? Jobs, jobs, and jobs, I would say, is the preoccupation, really wanting to get on with it and to get employment and development opportunities out of it was the resounding message that was being given to us. And we were there to explain the details and so on, and doing our work, showing that we're serious.
So the early works program runs through to September, and that's ahead of your major works, which are planned for October. So take us through how this moves forward, Harry.
Well, there's a cascading effect, really. You can imagine, when you look at that photo, you can see I'm standing on a hill where the temporary construction camp will be just to my left, or to the left of the photo, and in front is where the plant will be, and in the distance, as little hills are, is where the mine will be. So today it's a pristine agricultural site, and it has only the farming activities on it. So today what you're seeing is a pre-development site with hundreds of people running around talking about things and measuring things. And the cascade effect will commence with the resettlement of 350 households off that site. And in that photo, you can see some of those buildings in the distance, or some of those, dwellings. And they will be moved to new host lands that have now been surveyed by the government. It's the government's responsibility. They've done that job. And then it'll be sequenced so that the ones who have to move earliest do move earliest, so we can get onto the ground in the positions where we have to be more, in advance of other positions. And physically, what happens is it cascades up to the big yellow machinery, if you like, earth moving equipment, commencing its work around the end of the first quarter next year. And between October and the end of the first quarter next year is effectively focusing on the community on the ground and fabrication of equipment internationally to be delivered when the earthworks have prepared the ground for it. So, on a project that didn't have community resettlement involved, it might have been 6 months quicker. But at the same time, to turn it to advantage, if you like, in a country that has had some, security challenges, unprecedented ones in recent years, it's actually turned out to be a good thing, if you like, in that the intense interaction we're having with the community helps to establish our social license, so that we have the integrated relationships that we really need to build a workforce of 1,000 personnel. So a bit broad brush, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of it, I suppose.
Harry, in the meantime, you've also announced an internal corporate reorganization that's being implemented, and that's to facilitate the closing with regional investors and also the stock exchange listing that we've spoken about before. Can you take us through that reorganization?
Well, it's the reorganization of itself is sort of a bit, mundane, in the sense that what today is a registered branch in the country needs to be turned into an incorporated entity. But the more particular point about it is, putting aside the legalities of the structuring, is that we want to establish a local holding company that can house our not just our interest in Tulu Kapi, but in the pipeline of other things that we've been busy pegging. We've been very busy, but it's not really something one can advertise until after the fact. Busy reviewing lots of other opportunities to build into the pipeline of projects as the company matures in Ethiopia. You know, we now have registered applications over gold, lithium, nickel, copper, and that's, you know, it's not sort of jumping ahead of ourselves. You need to have a pipeline to work them up over time, but it's quite an exciting prospect because only very little modern exploration has occurred here, and most of the world has had its eye off the country for obvious reasons for the past few years, and we've been making ourselves very busy on the ground, if you like, establishing a very solid platform for future growth. Now, in terms of capital participation, because there's so much capital trapped in the country or locked in the country under local laws, we've been granted an exemption, but local, you know, high net worth or businesses or investment institutions can only invest within the country. So we've done a lot of work with local investors, and on the equity risk note component of our financing, it really is tailored to subsidiaries of multinationals in Ethiopia and also local, you know, Ethiopian investors, and that's coming along. We've just appointed a new Ethiopian director onto the parent company. There'll be a number of appointments to the Ethiopian holding company. And, you know, Ethiopia is a very proud country. It's been an independent, it's the only country in Africa never been colonized. And Ethiopianization is a very strong component of our long-term direction for the company in the country. And we think it will empower us. You know, we were able to stay here and be on the ground and establishing this pipeline and setting up our process so we could start development so quickly after the place settled down. And that's because we've demonstrated our commitment to the country. And as I say, establishing a local holding company will only bring in more Ethiopian support and stakeholders into the business.
Harry, can we move on to Saudi Arabia, perhaps? Could you give us an update on your projects there?
Yeah, that's in a sense, we jumped the bridge on localization at the beginning by becoming a minority shareholder against a majority right up front in that country. And but that progression there is, how would I put it in summary terms for shareholders? The two projects are still cooking. They're in a high pressure, really, boiler, you know, what do you call it, pressure cooker. There's a few new appointments being made for the next chapter there as we settle them down. We're expanding our horizons there as well. There's already a local holding company, and we're looking at creating new local subsidiaries for expansion of those businesses as they go forward, with local listings on the table there down the track. So although outside it's very difficult to, I suppose, feel the rate of work and the intensity of the work, because, you know, on the outside everyone's simply waiting for construction and production of Tulu Kapi. But frankly, internally, it's quite a frenzy, to be honest, and I think that's time will reveal it and demonstrate it. But both in this country, in Ethiopia, and over in Saudi, where I was a week ago for 2 weeks, it's quite a sort of frenzied level of action. We really feel like we're ahead of the pack, I suppose you could say. We feel like, having put in since 2008 in the Arabian-Nubian Shield, in an unloved part of the world, now that people are starting to love this part of the world, we feel like we need to take advantage of that position and spread our wings a bit and get positions in various assets that otherwise wouldn't be possible. And in a couple of years' time, there'll be lots of other people around us, I'm sure.
Well, Harry, I hope you'll keep us posted on progress in both jurisdictions. Thank you very much for the update today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
That's KEFI Gold and Copper Executive Chairman Harry Adams.